Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brian Hanley, and welcome to Steelers Almighty. Appreciate everybody joining us like you always do. Man, we have got a really good show for you guys today, like we always do every Wednesday, man. We're going to cover some topics here. I know the season's over, but that doesn't mean Steelers Almighty is slowing down one bit. We are just getting started in the offseason, man, so let's get into it. First things first, we're going to talk about Mike Tomlin. He's not going anywhere. It's already out. He's staying. We got to get past it. So let's talk. We're going to go into that and some of the things on maybe why he is staying with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then Minkah Fitzpatrick, man, just a dud. Absolute dud this season. We'll go into some of the reasons why. Changing to the coaching staff. The Steelers got to make some changes. We can't just sit pat and do nothing. Otherwise, I mean, a lot of people don't think it's going to get any better anyway because we still have Tomlin. But if we don't make any changes somewhere, then it's definitely not going to get better. And then last but definitely not least, our man Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones came out. They gave up the most sacks in the National Football League as a tandem, and basically they were the worst tandem as a tackle unit in the National Football League. We will go through that and some of the stats to break it down because it is ugly. Make sure you stick around for that, people. So we appreciate everybody being in here. Again, thank you for all the support. Remember, memberships are wide open. 5 different tiers that you can get into. We have the all 22 game film that we started doing a few weeks ago. So if you want to get the entire football game, you get into the all pro level or higher. Remember, the higher you go, the more content that you get. So we appreciate your support. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can always find us again at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. All social media platforms, you can find us at Steelers Almighty, and anywhere you get a podcast, we are at Steelers Almighty. So without further ado, let's get into this. So Mike Tomlin, he's coming back. I mean, the Rooneys pretty much put the kibosh and all the rumors and everything the very next day. It wasn't even 24 hours later after the Steelers got beat. Mike Tomlin, he's coming back. Okay, fine. So that's the first part. There's no reason to go into this offseason with a bunch of people just continuously saying that Tomlin's got to go. He's got to go. He isn't. It does no good to continuously say Tomlin's got to get out of here. We got to get rid of him. He's not going anywhere, people. He's not. And since he isn't, I mean, we got to figure out a way to be productive with him because he's going to be the football coach next year. Now, let's get into some of the reasons maybe why he's staying. The Rooneys, they don't like change. You know, they don't like change. They apparently not. I mean, again, you have 3 football coaches from 1969. Clearly, you're adverse to change. Now, you could all say that the coaches have been ultra successful. Yeah, you can definitely say that. So why change? But at some point in time, when, especially at the last several years here with Tomlin, you would like to think, okay, nothing else is getting accomplished. Like, we're not moving forward. And I've said this all along, and I'll continue to say this all off season. I've said it a million times. Mediocrity is the death of your franchise. And the Steelers are mediocre. Now, there's people that push back on that and say, well, we're making the playoffs. That's not mediocre. Yeah, it is. When you limp into the playoffs or you back into the playoffs and then you get your brains beaten in, that's mediocrity, people. I'm sorry. It just is. You may not think that it is, but it is. I mean, we didn't win anything. The only thing that it cost us was a better draft pick had we finished worse. We didn't get a higher draft pick, so we're sitting at 21 this year. I mean, I'm not saying we can't get a good football player. I'm just saying, what did we accomplish? Like, how did the franchise move forward? What steps did we take to get better? None. Now, is Mike Tomlin still a good football coach? I believe that he is. And even the biggest Mike Tomlin haters, I mean, there's some people that are just absolutely unreasonable, and so you don't take those people seriously. But Mike Tomlin is a leader of men. He absolutely is. In my opinion, anywhere between 55 and 70% of coaching in the National Football League as the head coach is you have to be a leader of men. And Mike Tomlin is that. Now, we can talk about his X's and O's and all that kind of stuff. That's a different conversation for a different day, because I'll battle anybody that tells me that Mike Tomlin is some mastermind X's and O guy. I don't think that he necessarily is. But I don't think that you always have to be. But when you have your thumbprint on everything and you're not an X and O mastermind, that's where my problem starts to seep in when it comes to that. But is he a good leader of men? Absolutely. And a leader of men, don't get confused with the people saying that he's just a cheerleader. No. A leader of men means you can get guys to do things that maybe they aren't necessarily always capable of doing. Mike Tomlin, for the most part, he's capable of doing that. Okay? Mike Tomlin is definitely capable of do that. Now, do I think his philosophy on how to win football games is outdated? I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million more. Yes. The NFL rules do not allow you to go out and win football games 17-14 any longer. They just don't. That's not the norm. Okay? You got to score points. Heck, we heard Mike Tomlin say it a million times. Got to score points. Well, playing great defense, paying a defense $160 million, paying your offense $64 million, and going out there and saying play great defense, great special teams, make a play or two at the end, win 17-14. Just can't do that. You can win games. You can have a winning season because you're going to win a few games that you're not supposed to win by being able to do that. And for the most part, you're going to beat a lot of teams that you should beat. And then you're going to luck up and beat some teams that are better than you because they'll commit some turnovers. You play ultra conservative and you win the game. Baltimore Ravens against the Steelers this year in Pittsburgh was the perfect example. They have 3 turnovers. We don't have any. We end up winning the football game. But when push came to shove at the end of the year, when the Ravens didn't make those turnovers, what did the game look like? Or even 3 weeks before that, what did the game look like? That's the difference and how that Mike Tomlin's philosophy. If you don't get the turnovers, can you just match up with somebody? No. Will he make the necessary changes? That's the next topic of discussion, because will he do it? You know, we've seen him be reluctant to make changes before because, look, all coaches in general have egos. Mike Tomlin is no different. He's got a big ego, but he's not any different than anybody else. You know, head coaches have egos. So people saying his ego's getting in the way, it is, but it gets in the way of all coaches. They want to be right. Well, I would push back on Mike Tomlin's his wanting to be right, saying, well, you haven't been right almost the last decade. So do something different, because the way that you're doing it is not working. And while we like you, while we support you being the leader, you know, because we want the team to win, at some point you got to make changes. And I mean, I know everybody says this nowadays, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But it holds true. It is. So we've got to be able to make the necessary changes, and not just on the coaching staff, which we'll talk about that later, but also in a philosophy of football. Mike Tomlin's just got to change. And that's been my whole argument from the very beginning. People are mad at me because I don't want Mike Tomlin around. It isn't that I don't want Mike Tomlin around. I think Tomlin's fine if he changed to modern football. I'd love to have Mike Tomlin be the leader of the Steelers and bring some young, innovative minds to his coordinating staff and his coaching staff. I would love it. But doing the things the way that we've been doing them over the last 10 years, it's not going to cut it. And I don't like it. And I know a lot of Steeler fans don't like it. It just hasn't been good enough. It hasn't been good enough. And the Rooneys don't seem to mind the mediocrity that's going on. Although last offseason, we heard Art Rooney II say, we got to start winning. He's right. We do have to start winning. But when does that start? Like, when are you going to put your foot down on that? Because you gave him an extension when you didn't have to give him an extension. And so he gave him another extension this past offseason for what? Like, to do what? So if you believe that Mike Tomlin's the guy to lead the Steelers out of this mediocrity, okay, great. But then how long are you going to give him? I mean, does he get a lifetime to get out of this? Does he get 1 year, 5 years? What's the timetable? Like, and to me, winning isn't backing into the playoffs. Winning isn't winning 10 games and losing the last 4 and then eventually the last 5 and not even being competitive in 4 of those football games. That isn't winning to me. Okay? And there's some people that do believe that that's winning. I don't. I just don't. What did we win? We won some games, but when it was really time to win the important games, the Steelers are nowhere to be found. And I'm not saying it's all on Mike Tomlin, so I don't want it to seem like I'm putting all the blame on him. But he does sign off on all the players on the roster. Yes, we have a general manager, but we also have a head coach, and there's not one player on this roster that he doesn't sign off on. Not one. So he holds a lot of the blame, man. But let's get to the poll question for our man, Mr. Mike Tomlin. Okay, how many more or fewer games do the Steelers win with Mike Tomlin at head coach in 2025? A, 3 or 4 less, so fewer. B, 1 to 2 fewer. C, we win 10 games again. It'll be the same. Or D, 1 to 4 more games in 2025. One of the things that I could probably tell you, depending on the schedule, I would doubt that the Steelers get this difficult of a schedule at the end of the year again. And I'm not sure who they play as far as the offseason. I haven't even looked that far yet as far as the NFC teams. If it's the North, it's trouble. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But how many more or fewer games do you believe that Mike Tomlin is going to win in 2025 as the head coach? So make sure you put your answers in the comment section. Let's move on, people. Let's move on. So I've been on his case all year. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick was an absolute dud this year. Absolute dud. And a lot of it, and I'll admit, and I'd been saying it all season, I don't think a ton of it was Minkah's fault, because I believe the position that he was put in, he was doing what they were asking him to do. Be the last line of defense. Don't let anybody get behind you. Eliminate their splash plays as much as you can, and be back, versus up crouched down the line of scrimmage. Okay. And that's fine. And again, I don't necessarily agree with that, because here's what I would say is, well, first off, he didn't force any turnovers this year. You got a free safety, a guy of his caliber that's not forcing any turnovers, no interceptions, and spare me the interception that he had at Baltimore, where Rashard Bateman stopped on a route and Minkah happened to be 10 yards behind him and he catches the football. When I talk about create a turnover or a splash play, I mean he steps in front of somebody and intercepts a ball, forces a fumble, something of that nature. Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't do any of that this year. Now, again, a lot of that was they weren't asking him to be that guy. But I think he's got to be. He's making $18 million. $18 million for what? Like, and I've said this over several podcasts, and I'm not picking on Minkah. I'm just telling the truth, people. You could pay a guy, for instance, Deshaun Elliott, I think this year was making, $3 million. Who had the bigger impact, Deshaun Elliott or Minkah Fitzpatrick? That's all you need to know. And for $18 million, if I'm pretty sure the Steelers could find somebody to do exactly what he did, make sure the secondary's lined up. Now, you could even say he did a horrible job at that. How many times were the Steelers secondary not know the coverage, out of position, not lined up correctly? So if Minkah is supposed to be the quarterback back there, then what the hell's going on? So you could even say he did a terrible job at that. All I know is you can get somebody for $3 million to do what he did. And you can take the rest of that money and spend it on the offensive side of the football. I like Minkah. I think Minkah is a great player. I think he's past his prime. I think the Steelers go to Minkah this offseason and they say, here's the deal. Either we're going to trade you or you got to take a pay cut or we're just going to cut you. Because they save a ton of money if they trade him or cut him post June 1st on the salary cap, a ton of money. And when I'm talking about a ton, I'm talking about in the excess of $13 million or $10 million, excuse me. So do you want to keep Minkah? And if you do, we're still willing to pay him $18 million next year? Because I am not. I'm not. You got to take a pay cut, a big one too. A big pay cut, my man. Like in the excess of, we're going to pay you $9 million down from your 18. I totally understand if you don't want to do that, but we got to let you go. And he has no guaranteed money, so we got to let you go. Sorry. It's just, this is the way that it works. We paid you, but now your skill set and what you're being paid no longer match up. That's the cruel world of the NFL, but it's the right world of the NFL. And that's the whole thing about the NFL is that you know the rules going into it. We don't have to like it, but we know what it is. And he no longer, from what I have watched and what you guys have watched too, Minkah's not worth $18 million. Not anymore. Not anymore. You know, you got to be able to spread that money around some other places and get some more resources. Heck, you could get 2 more people to do something for that kind of money. And like I said, Minkah's been great. It's been spectacular, but it's not the Minkah of old. Let's just say that. He is not the Minkah of old. And I have always been in the camp of you get rid of guys a year too early versus a year too late. And in Minkah's case, maybe it's a year too early. I don't know, but I think it's right on time. It right on time coincides with big number in his contract and his performance on the field. Like I said, I like him, but I think he's the first guy that you go to before anybody else and say, hey, man, we got to trade you or we got to cut you. Or you can take a huge pay cut. You decide what you want to do. But here's the thing. If we get a trade for you, you're not going to have an option. So just telling you what our plans are in this offseason for our man, Minkah Fitzpatrick. So let's go to the poll question. All right. How important is it to you that the Steelers stay true to their always a Steeler ways of holding on to veteran players past their prime? So let me read that again. How important is it to you guys that the Steelers stay true to their Steeler ways, always a Steeler, of holding on to veteran players past their prime? You know, we have a history of doing that. A, is it very important? B, impartial. C, not important at all. Or D, man, F them players. I don't know if I'm in that boat, but I'm in the boat. You know what? We always talk about doing what's best for the franchise, what's best for the team. That's kind of what always gets put out there. Let's do what's best for the team. Well, in the cruel world of the NFL, tough decisions have to be made, but it's a business. And that would be one of the business decisions that the Steelers just got to make this offseason. Will they do it? Probably not. And we're probably going to be very, very upset. We're spending $149 million on defense versus $160 next year. But I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. Let's be positive and let's try to figure this thing out. But unfortunately, I think Minkah, not worn out is welcome. That's not the right word. But the salary just doesn't meet the production anymore. It just doesn't. Moving on. We are at halftime, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a perfect time for me to tell you guys again about our memberships. First off, I want to thank everybody for all the support that you have given Steelers Almighty, man. Thank you guys a ton. The off season is among us, and we are still going to have a ton of content out for you guys. So memberships are now available. Make sure that you sign up. I mentioned it earlier in the show. The higher tier membership that you are, the more content that you get. If you want all 22 of the entire football game, we put out 10 plays for you guys, during the season. But if you want an all 22 of the entire football game on how I break down the plays, go and sign up at the All Pro membership or higher, and you will have access to that. So also remember, like, follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Make sure you continue to get into the comments section. We appreciate that. There is a link, not only here, there is a link in the comments section. There is a join membership at the front of the page. So anywhere, there's several different places where you guys can join and be a member of Steelers Almighty, man. We have got a lot going on for you. Audio listeners, make sure that you hit the link that is in the episode description. So in case you are not following on, in case you're not watching per se. So we appreciate all of that from everybody, man. Looking forward to this offseason. Really looking forward to it because we can get real creative and we plan on doing that. So thank you guys for being in here, and we will keep on trucking during this offseason. So let's keep pushing forward. So I mentioned earlier Mike Tomlin making changes. Well, the changes that he personally needs to make is to his staff. Got to make some staff changes. Too many things not going right, and they got to make the changes. Now, will he do that? I don't know. Mike Tomlin's a pretty loyal guy. He tends to hire guys that a lot of people say are yes men. Drives me absolutely insane when that guy that he hires these type of people. It's not conducive to it basically it lends itself to one train of thought. You know, when you have a bunch of different coaches, but a lot of them are just, okay, we're going to go along whatever Mike T says, versus having guys, hey, man, this would work better. This would work better. I've been doing this. This works. Hey, coach, this works. When you're not having a ton of that and everything has to seemingly go through one person, that's not conducive to to winning, number one, because we haven't. And it's not conducive to the NFL where the standards on how football is being played today. It's just things are different. You need to think differently. Everybody can't be, okay, this is the one way to think. We've got to do it this way. That's it. That doesn't work. That's not the best way as far as a coaching staff or a team. Steelers got to change. Mike Tomlin's got to make those changes. Now, the first question, who are those people? To me, it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all. Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach. I mean, who's developed under him? Now, a lot of people are giving credit and saying, well, Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier, you know, those are two rookies and they played all year. Well, anybody that paid any attention to the All-22 that I put out each week, and if you haven't, it was of the offensive line. Make sure you go and check those out. Mason McCormick's technique was atrocious all season long. It never got better. You could actually argue that it got worse as he got more fatigued as the season went on. But his technique started bad and it ended bad. Well, Pat Meyer's the coach. Zach Frazier came in like a dog. I mean, and I'm not sure that it had anything to do with Pat Meyer. But if you want to give him credit for that, okay. Let's be fair. Let's be fair and give him some credit for that. Well, then let's go to our tackles. Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones. We're going to get to them here in a second. I don't have to say anything about that. Like, how has Broderick Jones regressed from last year? It's not even up for debate. Not even up for debate. You could even say that Dan Moore, that he did the same. But Pat Meyer, he's just got to go. We got to get some different techniques in there, some different ways, trains of thought. I'm sorry. And look, I'm not an advocate for people losing their jobs. I'm not calling for the firings. I'm saying Mike Tomlin needs to make a change. These guys are good football coaches. They can go get a job somewhere else. But for the Pittsburgh Steelers, we need somebody else. We need somebody better, and it's okay to say that. Also a change that needs to be done. Grady Brown. He's the defensive back coach. I just finished talking to you guys about communication in the defensive backfield. Seems like guys were lost. Anytime anybody went in motion, we couldn't figure out coverage. We couldn't get lined up correctly. Some of that's got to be on the secondary coach, okay? Or unless the Steelers just have a bunch of dumb guys that can't figure it out, which I don't think that that's necessarily the case. A lot of secondary issues, not lined up, technique bad. Maybe there's just some bad football players, which, okay, that's fine. But at the same time, not people not being able to line up right or recognize what coverage you should be in based on a team's alignment. You work all week on that. You go to meetings all week on that, and still people are lost. I find that's inexcusable, to be honest with you. If you get physically beat and somebody's just faster than you, we don't like it, but at least we can accept it. But when you're not lined up properly and then you get beat because you're just not in the right position, or you don't know the coverage and you blow a coverage because you have no idea what's going on, that's a problem. And that's coaching. That's coaching. Again, unless you just want to say the secondary is full of a bunch of dummies, and I'm not ready to say that, then that's coaching. We got to make a change there. And then last but not least, look, Terrell Austin, I'm sure he's a good guy, but the Steelers defense is so vanilla. It is so vanilla. And yes, Mike Tomlin has got thumb, hand, his whole body print on the defense. Yes, he does. But if Terrell Austin, we see it on the sidelines. Terrell Austin is the guy that's actually calling the defense. Okay? Mike Tomlin may put in the game plan. It might very well be his defense. But the person who's actually calling the plays, you've seen it on the sideline, it is Terrell Austin. That's got to change. Now, if Mike Tomlin wants to be the play caller, and maybe he doesn't want to be, maybe he doesn't want that responsibility, okay, fine. But Terrell Austin can no longer call him because the Steelers defense is so vanilla. They don't run twist inside, outside, T in stunt. They don't do any of that. They don't zone blitz. It's just, we're going to line up. We're going to let our outside guys see if they can beat your outside guys. We're going to blitz our middle linebackers maybe once or twice a game. We're not going to disguise anything. Nothing. And it's not working. It is not working. So I'm sorry that he might have to bite the bullet, even though that Mike Tomlin is the person who's all over this defense. The person who's calling the defense on Sundays, we've seen it. Terrell Austin, it's not working. Not working. We need a different mind in there. Even if it's the same plays, change it up. This isn't working. We got to do something different. We got to move TJ Watt around. If he's going to be on our football team, regardless if TJ wants to move or not, I'm sorry, TJ. In the best interest of the football team, we need you to line up inside and maybe twist around, or we need you to be outside and twist inside. You got to be flexible and doing different things. That's in the best interest of the football team. And same for Highsmith, same for everybody. Got to be flexible. You got to move people around. We can't just line up in nickel, which we lined up 58% of the time, and then just say, okay, we're just going to try to physically beat you. We're not going to out-scheme you or anything like that. So damn the schematics of it all. We're just going to beat you man on man, and the Steelers are not good enough to do that. So I'm sorry. He has to go. So let's go to the poll question. Poll. So if Tomlin stays, wholesale changes need to be made at some position. Which position needs a new coach the most? So which position needs to be changed the most? Is it the offensive line, A? Is it B, linebackers? Is it C, secondary? Or is it D, offensive and defensive coordinator? And I purposely didn't put Arthur Smith in there because I still say, look, I'm not a Arthur Smith apologist, and we're too vanilla. We definitely are. Run, pass. But the topic that we're going to get to next is the reason why I don't have Arthur Smith in there. That's literally the reason why. So let me know what your answers are on this. A, offensive line, B, linebacker, C, secondary, or D, offensive and defensive / coordinator. Let's move on, people. Move on. So I found an article today, and it didn't make me laugh like I'm laughing now. It just made me say, that figures. Is that the tandem of Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones were basically the article is saying that they were the worst offensive line tackles tandem in the league. and they gave up the most sacks in the league as a tandem. Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones. Here's the thing about Dan Moore, and we can break down both of them. And this is why I don't put the credence on Arthur Smith all the time, or Russell Wilson, is because we want to always blame the offensive coordinator when things don't go right. We want to always blame the quarterback when things don't go right. Well, when you got an offensive line and an offensive lineman who are giving up the most sacks in their position in the National Football League, that makes it tough. That makes it tough. Let's break down some things here. First off, Dan Moore Jr. played good basically the first 8 games. He played good. After that, it was the definition of falling off a cliff, of just running right up to the cliff, and the cliff had no slope. It was straight down. That is what Dan Moore Jr. did, people. Because there is a reasonable argument. The way he played the first 8 games, you could say, and I said it on here, you know what? Dan Moore Jr. is playing pretty good. He might have worked himself into a contract. Well, if that was the case, as much praise as you could have given him then, he worked himself out of a contract and maybe out of the National Football League, people, because that's how bad he was the second half of the season. He gave up 10 sacks from week 11 on. He gave up 12 on the year. 10 of those came from week 11 on. Oh, and by the way, of those times, 4 different times he gave up double-digit sacks in a game. Week 11, week 12, week 17, week 18. Think about that. Now, you could say, oh, well, they're playing better competition. I did. So? Who cares? You know, that doesn't mean you have to give up a bunch of sacks. People kill me all the time when they talk about, well, you know, they're playing really good guys and those guys get paid. They do, but that doesn't mean you have to give up sacks because they're paying you as well. And no, that doesn't mean that I could go out there and do any better before anybody gets in there. But you know what? They're not paying me, a 49-year-old fat black dude, millions of dollars to keep people from sacking anybody either. So before anybody gets in the comments and says that I couldn't do better, you're right. I can't. But neither can he. That's the point. Got to be better. And not to mention, not just the sacks, because the big thing we see the sacks, the pressures. He gave up 41 pressures this year, which is a ton. 27 of those, again, came from week 11 on. I can't make it up. That's how bad Dan Moore Jr. was the second half of the season. Terrible, terrible. Now we go to our man Broderick Jones, who gave up 10 sacks. 3 of those were after week 10. Okay? So you could say technically Broderick got better. He was awful early in the season, but he made some strides to get better. Not sure. Especially in the wild card game, you saw him getting worked out there. He gave up a sack and 2 pressures in that game. But again, the pressures, 43 pressures, a ton of pressure. I mean, pressures are just as much of a havoc on your offense and all your play call than a sack is. Just as much. Well, he gave up 43. 22 came from week 10 on. So basically half came from week 10 on. So did Broderick get better? Maybe he didn't give up as many sacks, but pressures, yeah. And then you talk about, this is why I don't give any credence to PFF. And I talk PFF being a tool. Like sometimes it works for us, sometimes it doesn't. But like Dan Moore Jr. is like the number 42, and Broderick was, I think, 65 tackle. In my opinion, they should have been at the bottom of the list. I mean, the absolute bottom of the list is that they just weren't. First of all, they're not physical, and that's crazy because Broderick should be way more physical. People are saying he's hurt. It just doesn't look good. It didn't look good all year long. Just didn't look good. And there are so many times where they just give up on a play. Like they don't finish blocking. Well, part of that's coaching, and I mentioned that before. One of the reasons why I think Pat Myers got to go. Are you teaching guys to finish blocks? Because it doesn't seem like you're teaching them to finish blocks. Because if you are, and this is what they're doing, then you definitely got to go. But it just didn't look good for either tackle this season. Basically, the second half of the season, just off a cliff. Broderick, not so much off a cliff. Broderick was bad all year. Dan Moore was good, and then zoom, straight down. So when you go to blame Russell Wilson and you go to blame Arthur Smith, conservative play calling, not getting the ball out of their hand, not seeing the whole field, which, again, all of that's still true. But when you put all the blame on those guys, just remember that they were dealing with the worst tackle tandem in the National Football League. Just keep that in mind, that's what they were doing. When we're talking about, they don't throw it enough, they don't throw the ball down the field, we don't throw it over the middle, we're too conservative. Just think about what we are dealing with on a tackle basis. And then, okay, maybe it makes sense to you, maybe it doesn't. But these are not made up facts, people. It's very readily available to you. So I'm not just making it up to seem like it was that bad. No, it was that bad. It was that bad. Let's go to the poll question. Barring free agency and draft, which tackle lineup would you hate the least in 2025? Moore at left tackle, Faetano at right tackle. That's A. B, Faetano at left tackle, Moore at right tackle. C, Jones at left tackle, Faetano at right tackle. And D, Faetano at left tackle and Jones at right tackle. So barring free agency and the draft, saying the Steelers don't get any new bodies at tackle, which tackle lineup would you hate the least? So tricky wording there. Tricky wording. But we're going to see, because first of all, there's no way that Dan Moore Jr. is on the Steelers team next year. There's no possible way. I say no possible way, but we've seen crazier stuff. So who knows? And Faetano's got to prove that he can stay healthy. That was part of his problem in college. Part of the reason why he slipped. He's got to be able to stay healthy to help the Steelers. So we will see all of that, people. So look, man, offseason is coming. This is a crucial offseason for the Steelers. The one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is I think we just got to turn the page on the Mike Tomlin out of here stuff. He's going to be the coach next year. Unless something crazy happens between now and whenever, free agency, whatever the case may be, he's going to be the coach. So as much as we want to scream, you got to get Tomlin out of here, he's got to go, he's not. So I just think it's counterproductive to constantly say that. We can say he needs to make changes. You can complain about him, but he's not going anywhere. Not for next year. So I think it's better if we concentrate our energy on, okay, how can we get better? How can we make it work? And yes, there is a way to be better with Mike Tomlin at the helm. Doesn't mean we're going to win a Super Bowl. Not saying that. But there is a way to get better. Unfortunately, they're not paying me or you to make those decisions. Maybe they should. I don't know. But the bottom line is Tomlin's here. The Rooneys are dug in on it for now. And since he's here and they are dug in, let's try to figure out some ways where we can better the football team. Draft, free agency, coaching changes, whatever the case may be, to move into 2025 in a better position. So I appreciate you all, man. That's all I got for you today. Thank everybody for being in here as always. Thank you guys for the support that you have shown us. Again, make sure that you sign up for memberships, several different places. Link in the comments section on the front of Steelers Almighty page. There's a place to join. The higher you go as far as a member, the more content that you get. We just started a few weeks ago. The content is rolling out. So that all 22, all games seems to be pretty popular. So got to be at the all-pro level or higher to be able to get that. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, not only in this video, but all Steelers Almighty videos. We appreciate you. Thank you, guys, and aloha.